You want to play the Division 2 and enjoy everything the game has to offer, but you don't want to have to group with other players. Well, in this video, I'm going to go through everything you can and can't do solo and let you know if the Division 2 is worth your time as a solo player. In this video, I'm going to sort all of the things you can do in the Division 2 into 3 categories. No friends, no problem, if I have to, and no thank you. No friends, no problem are activities you can do completely solo with no human interaction required at all. If I have to are things that you can matchmake into with other players, but you don't have to talk to anyone, so there is no social interaction needed if you don't want to. And no thank you are activities that need a group's planning and chat in order to pull off. Then I'll be discussing whether or not the Division 2 is worth your time as a solo player. Let's start with what I think is what most people clicked on this video for. What can we do as solo players in the Division 2? To be honest, most of the in-game activities are completely playable solo. In fact, some are actually more punishing for groups, with NPC health and damage scaling quite dramatically when you group with more than one other person. To start, the full Division 2 story and side missions that take you around the map telling the story of the Division and the settlements around Washington DC trying to rebuild after the green poison outbreak. A lot of these missions take place in some pretty interesting locations around the 1-to-1 scale Washington DC map, including famous museums and landmarks like the Air and Space Museum, American History Museum and Lincoln Memorial. Story missions can be replayed with a range of difficulties, but side missions are a one-time playthrough. After that, the locations are reused for replayable bounties, which you can also run solo. On top of this, every open world activity can be played completely solo, from quick hostage rescues to taking over enemy control points. There is a ton of replayable activities that you can grind whenever you feel like it, with changeable open world difficulties, for better loot and more of a challenge. If you're a bit of a completionist like myself, the Division 2 has a huge amount of different collectibles for you to track down and collect. Audio comms, artifacts, databases, and echoes which let you relive past moments, to name a few. The Division 2 also has commendations, which are the game's version of achievements or trophies. If you're looking for something a little deeper and with more mystery, then you're in for a real treat. The Division 2 has a ton of hidden secrets, from fun little Easter eggs to more complicated hunter puzzles, which you can find, complete and earn collectible masks. What if you're looking for difficulty? Well, to that I say legendaries. Legendaries are really designed for a group of 4 players, however this has not stopped a small amount of hardcore players from finishing these completely solo. Legendary is a difficulty setting for select missions, replacing the NPCs with what players refer to as the White Tusk, a version of the Black Tusk with everything turned up to 11. These missions are very difficult solo, but definitely not impossible for the dedicated few. The Division 2 also has a full expansion, the Warlords of New York, a full story expansion with a new added map, side activities and story missions to play through. And just like the base story, this is completely playable solo. So missions and open world sounds good, but you want a little variation in your gameplay. Well, as a completely solo player, you have 2 options when it comes to different PvE game modes. First, there is Kenley College, a small area cut into 3 sections that present you with small puzzles to complete. For your first playthrough, it's all about figuring out how to complete the puzzles, but after that you're presented with a time trial version of the game mode, giving you more rewards the faster you complete the sections. Then there's the Summit, a 100-floor skyscraper with randomly generated floors, NPC factions and objectives. In the Summit you climb the skyscraper, fighting your way to floor 100, earning rewards as you go. Now, where playing solo falls short in the Division 2 is probably with the PvP. The only true solo PvP in the Division 2 is taking to the Dark Zones on your own, which with the Division's low time to kill, isn't always the best idea. The Dark Zones are lawless PvPvE areas of the map that can have up to 12 players per area. These can be great fun solo, but most of the time you'll probably be running up against groups of 4, which puts you at a massive disadvantage. If you are able to take out one player, the other 3 will probably focus you down pretty quick. There is some fun to be had in the Dark Zone, but it can also be pretty punishing as a solo experience. So that's everything you can do in The Division 2 if you want to keep it a 100% solo experience. But if you could deal with being in a group with other players, as long as you don't actually have to talk to anyone, your choice of activities opens up a little. If you're open to grouping up with players without actually having to interact with them, there are a few more activities that you can matchmake into. For PvE, there is Countdown, an 8-player game mode that puts you at a power plant on the brink of meltdown. It's up to you and 7 other agents to shut it down by completing various objectives around the map. And when it comes to PvP, if you're willing to matchmake, you can jump into Conflict, a 4v4 PvP game mode with a small collection of different maps and objective types. This doesn't seem like a lot, but personally, I think these are some of the best PvE and PvP activities currently in the game. We've talked about what you can do as a completely solo player and a few things you can do if you're open to matchmaking, but what is completely off limits for a solo player? There's actually very little in The Division 2. There is actually very little in The Division 2 you can't do as a solo player. The only activities that are really off limits are the raids. There are currently 2 8-player raids in The Division 2, Dark Hours and Iron Horse. These are difficult 8-player raids that require constant communication and timing between players and their roles within the raid encounters, which have timing and puzzle elements. The raids do have an easier difficulty that you can matchmake into, but I would say these still require communication to succeed. This does also mean you won't be able to collect every exotic in the game, exotics being unique and rare weapons and gear with special talents and cosmetic looks. Some of these exotic weapons are raid exclusive rewards, which means you can't get them without completing the raids. For some people, this isn't a huge deal, but if you want to collect everything in the game, this might be a bit of a downside for you. This also applies to raid commendations. These are commendations that you can only complete within the raids, which means as a solo player, you can't complete all of the commendations. If you're a completely solo player looking for a looter shooter with a good PvE loot grind and plenty of content that you can play without having to interact with another human being, then The Division 2 might be worth a look. There's plenty to do from story, collectibles, and a fair endgame. Plus, if you're willing to matchmake without having to talk to anyone, a few more game modes open up to you. Where The Division 2 will let you down is on the PvP side, but this isn't just a solo player problem. The Division 2 is lacking in PvP variety in general, but completely solo, I think you might get bored of the Dark Zone pretty quick. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any future content. As always, a big thank you to my supporters over on Patreon for helping me make this channel the best it can be. If you are a solo player, what kind of looters have you been playing, and what kind of games would you like to see me break down for solo players? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.